Good morning, fifth grade. We're going to continue reading in our novel, Esperanza Rising. Before we get started, we have a quick write. It says, how does Abuelita's presence change Esperanza's perspective of her future? So you need to think about before Abuelita came to the United States, Esperanza was feeling hopeless about her future. But now that she's reunited with Abuelita, she is feeling hopeful that the future will get better. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the focus question. Our focus question today is, how do big metaphors in Esperanza Rising show up over and over again to convey a theme? Our standard we're working on is analyzing figurative language in order to determine potential themes. Our vocabulary words are coming of age, and that is the process of growing up. And so these plants are a picture of coming of age. The plant is growing up or maturing. The next word is phoenix, and that is a mythological creature who lived in the desert and was able to renew its life each year or every couple of centuries by being burned by fire. And then the last word is cacophony, and that is a mixture of sounds. Usually it's not a good thing. All right, we're going to start reading on page 244, and we're going to be using our CSPS strategy. So everyone is around Abuelita, and Esperanza goes to get the blanket because she remembers her promise. I'm at they all. They all gathered on the quilt and at the table. Esperanza sat down and pulled the massive blanket next to her, took the needle, and began crocheting the final stitches. When Mama could finally speak, she looked at Abuelita and asked the same thing Esperanza had asked. How did you get here? Miguel, said Abuelita, came for me. Luis and Marco have been impossible. If I went to the market, one of their spies would follow me. I think they thought you were still in the area and would eventually come back for me. 10 stitches up the top of the mountain. Esperanza listened to Abuelita tell Mama about how infuriated Tio Luis had been when he found out they were gone. He'd become obsessed with finding them and questioning all their neighbors, including Senor Rodriguez. They had even come to the convent to question her sisters, but no one told him anything. Add 1 stitch. A few months after they left, she had the premonition that something was wrong with Mama. The feeling would not let go of her, so she lit candles every day for months and prayed for their safety. 10 stitches down the bottom of the valley. Then one day, when she had almost given up hope, she found an injured bird in the garden that she did not think would fly again. But the next morning, when she approached it, the bird lifted into the sky. She knew it was a sign that whatever had been wrong were better. Skip 1 stitch. Then one of the nuns brought her a note that someone left in the poor box addressed to her. It had been from Miguel. He suspected that Abuelita was being watched, so he delivered his notes after dark, telling her his plan. 10 stitches up to the top of the mountain. Okay, we'll stop right there because we have information about the characters and the setting. In box 1A, we'll describe the character. We would say, Esperanza crochets the final stitches of Abuelita's blanket, and Abuelita tells them the story of how Miguel brought her to the United States. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the setting. And we know from the first paragraph that they're all gathered in the kitchen. So in 1B, we would write, everyone is in the kitchen on the quilt and around the table listening to Abuelita's story. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the problem. And we know that one of the reasons Abuelita couldn't get to the United States was because Tia Luis was watching her, and another problem was that she sensed that something was wrong with Mama, even from far away. And so in box 2, we'll write the problem. Abuelita could not get to the United States because Tia Luis kept close watch of her. And Abuelita got a premonition that Mama was sick. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to keep reading. All right, and throughout her telling the story, the author is describing the steps of knitting. But if you'll notice, those steps of the mountains and valleys match up with the highs and lows of Abuelita's journey. And so you'll notice when she says that she noticed something was wrong with Mama, it says 9 stitches down the bottom of the valley. And that kind of symbolizes that something bad is going on. She's in a valley. But then she sees the bird and something good happens, and then it says 10 stitches up to the top of the mountain. That's how she knows Mama is better. And as she's telling the story, she's also going up the mountain as she's knitting, which is a sign that things are getting better. We're at the bottom of the page. Miguel and Senor Rodriguez came in the middle of the night and took her to the train station. It was all very exciting, and Miguel didn't leave her side once during the entire trip. He brought her all the way here. Add 1 stitch. He said that Ramona and Esperanza needed her. He was right, said Mama, her eyes teary again, gratefully looking at Miguel. Mountains and valleys, mountains and valleys. So many of them, thought Esperanza. When a strand of her hair fell into her lap, she picked it up and wove it into the blanket, so that all of the happiness and emotion that she felt at this moment would go with it forever. When Esperanza told Abuelita their story and all that had happened to them, she didn't measure time by usual words. Instead, she told it as a field worker, in spans of fruits and vegetables, and by what needed to be done to the land. They had arrived in a valley at the end of grapes, Thompson seedless, red Malagas, and the blue-black Ribieres. Mama breathed in the dust at the end of grapes, and that's when she got sick. Then it had been a time to prune the grapes and get ready for potatoes. Working potatoes was in the heart of winter and the cold that dampened the bones. And during potato eyes, Mama had gone to the hospital. There had been no months with names, only the time and trying canes amidst the ghost of grapes and the gray days that never warmed. But afterward came the anticipation of spring and the valley pregnant with needs, graceful asparagus, ripening vineyards, and groaning trees. Then early peaches called, crickets in the fields started their nightly symphonies, and Mama came home. Abuelita arrived during plums, and now the grapes were delivering another harvest, and Esperanza was turning another year. All right, we'll stop right there and go to box 3. It says, what metaphor does Abuelita use to tell the story of her journey to the United States? And if we go back, we notice that she uses the metaphor of the mountains and valleys as she's knitting the last row of the blanket. And so in box 3A, we would write, Abuelita uses the metaphor of the mountains and valleys as she tells the story, and Esperanza completes the blanket. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for 3B. It says, what effect does this metaphor have on the reader? And like we said before, when Abuelita is talking about the difficulties, she's in the valley as she's knitting the blanket. And when she's talking about the good times or the overcoming obstacles, that's when she's at the mountain part of knitting the blanket. So it kind of mirrors what's going on in the story. In 3B, we would write, Abuelita is telling about mountains and valleys, or the difficulties and successes she faced while trying to get to the United States. Her journey is now complete, just like the blanket. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for box 4. What does Esperanza learn about herself as Abuelita finishes the story? And we'll go to this part on page 246. Esperanza talks about how when she tells her own story, she doesn't tell it by months like January, February, March. She tells it in the order of the season based on what was being harvested at the time. Grapes, potatoes, plums. And so in box 4A, we would write, as Esperanza tells about her own mountains and valleys that year, she measures the time in seasons like a field worker. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for 4B. It says, how does this lesson contribute to the structure of the text? And just like we talked about yesterday, we know that the book is organized by seasons for each chapter. This shows how Esperanza's perspective has changed throughout the course of the text. She began to accept her life as a field worker. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the paragraph. It says, how do big metaphors in Esperanza Rising show up over and over again to convey a theme? And so you can talk about the blanket and the mountains and valleys and how that's showing up over and over again when the readers talk about, when the characters talk about their successes and difficulties, and how now that the blanket is finished, they are reunited again as a family, and we have hope that they're going to be stronger together.